And if you had to describe leadership in one word, what will it be?
Ooh,
Yes?
one word.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna say change, because leadership is all about change, right? And then we could start talking about all the things that go into, of which I believe, of course, trust is one of the key components of having the influence in order to achieve change.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast. The following is a conversation with George Dom. George is a former naval aviator, a Blue Angels flight leader, and an instructor at the legendary Topgun school. He's also a business consultant and an expert on high trust leadership, teaching individuals and teams to lead with trust, competence, and character. I've been looking forward to this conversation. The stakes are incredibly high when it comes to trust and leading a team where the margin for error is virtually non-existent. You can't afford mistakes when moving at a high speed, just inches away from your teammates, making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between mission success and disaster. This is leadership in its most intense and forgiving form, and I can't wait to dive into it. I'm your host, Sid Bensalah. Today we'll explore the power of trust in leadership and covering real stories and insights that matter. George's experience leading elite teams under extreme pressure provides invaluable lessons relevant to sports business and beyond. To support our show, please check the episode description. Now let's dive in. George, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Sid. Great to be with you.
I want to set the scene before we get into leadership principles. Imagine leading a team where discipline, precision, and trust are not just important, they are everything. The Blue Angels execute at the level where there is no room for doubt, no space for hesitation. George, you've been in the cockpit leading this elite squadron. Let's start with your journey. What pivotal experiences shaped your leadership philosophy?
Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a process, of course, a journey, if you will. I was blessed with terrific parents. My father was a great leader himself and instilled in me some values and so forth that I've hung on to ever since. I think when I left college and joined the Navy and raised my right hand and swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, I think that was a significant event where you are dedicating yourself to something bigger than yourself. And then that whole experience, I was on active duty in the Navy for 26 years. I made 9 deployments overseas on aircraft carriers, flying day and night in peacetime and combat and so forth. And so all of those, but particularly that experience of being on a ship of 5,000 people that come from all walks of life, all classes, all ethnicities, and we come together under a common mission with shared sacrifice. We're all in this together. We're all away from home. And it was that experience, that living laboratory of leadership, if you will, that really formed a lot of my experience and made me who I became as a leader.
And what are the biggest lessons from flying with the Blue Angels and what you said now that carries over to leadership today?
Well, I think, the principles of leadership are the same, no matter whether you're in business or sports or in the military and so forth. And certainly they don't change when the consequences go up. You just can't compromise whenever it is literally life and death, right? So it's in these very extreme environments, I think, that these principles are revealed and you can't accept anything else, right? It has to work. So that's, I think, is really was the key for
And
me.
on that, George, can you recall a high pressure moment where leadership made all the difference?
Well, I think, boy, you could name a lot of those, and some of them in the high pressure moments, people are looking to their leader for personal example, right? And there's plenty of examples of that, right? Where in the moment, when people are wondering, how is this going to go? They're looking to their leader for example, for inspiration, and so forth. So, I mean, I think there's plenty of examples of that all over the place.
And George, are leaders made or born?
Oh, I think some people have certain traits and tendencies that make it maybe easier to become a leader, but leaders are definitely made. It takes, to be a really great leader, it takes effort, it takes reflection, it takes discipline, it takes training to become a leader. And I believe, leaders come in all sizes, shapes, temperaments, personalities. So anybody can become a leader, and the most difficult person to lead, of course, is yourself,
Yeah.
right? We all need to become leaders, first leading ourselves and then leading others who are, entrusted to our care.
And for our listeners, how would you define leadership?
I would define leadership as the ability to bring people together under a common mission, a common purpose, a common goal, and help them together go someplace new. Leadership is all about change in my mind. I believe management is about taking the current situation, the status quo, and trying to make it better in terms of more efficient, more productive, that sort of thing. Leadership is about going someplace new, someplace you haven't been before, and having the influence with the people on your team in order to bring them along and get there and leverage their skills and abilities as well.
And on that, taking risks, is it part of some sort of leadership?
Oh, yeah. I think anytime that you're going someplace new, there's always some risk involved, right? But you try to do your best to mitigate the risk so that it's an acceptable level, so that people, they may be anxious, they may be nervous about it, but you've invested in them and they believe in you and your vision, and you have done the work to put the resources and everything in place so that you have the best chance for success.
And on that comes the word that we love, every leader champion, is trust. How would you define high trust leadership and why it is so vital?
Yeah, so I talk about high trust. Uh, I see that there's sort of like three different types of trust, right? You got what I call trust 1.0. That's sort of your garden variety trust, right? That's where you're driving down the highway and you expect the other car coming the other way to stay on their side of the line, right? You're trusting that they're going to do that. And then there's trust 2.0, where you've invested in the relationship, but it's conditional, right? If you do A and B, I'll trust you with C. Or it's selective. I'll trust you here, but I'm not trusting you there. And that's really where we spend a lot of our lives, is in this conditional trust area. And that's why in business, you have to have contracts that artificially raise the level of trust, because you very explicitly line out, here's what each party is expected to do, and here's what the repercussions are if you don't live up to that agreement, those expectations, right? But what I'm talking about is the next step, and that is when you've invested in the relationships in your team and so forth, in your family, whatever it might be, because it applies everywhere. But you get to the point where they believe, I trust you, period. And it's that unconditional trust. You know, conditional trust feels like a contract, right? Unconditional trust, high trust is a covenant. It's a special relationship between people if you've done the investments, and that's where the magic happens. That's where the really high performance happens, and it's not easy. It's hard work, but it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
well
it
worth
is.
it.
It is. Well said. Why is trust often overlooked in leadership conversations?
You know, it's funny to me that people don't think about it, proactively. In fact, they typically only think about it whenever it's broken, and then they're trying to figure out, how to get it back. And that's frankly my pitch when I talk to organizations and leaders is, if you can think about this proactively, where you're building trust, because what I've seen in high performing teams, certainly everyone that I've ever been a part of, whether it was with the Blue Angels or Topgun or a fighter squadron in combat, trust wasn't just something nice to have. And it wasn't something that you could just expect by putting good people, talented people together. I mean, we all know sports teams that have collected some amazing talent, but they just don't win because they haven't developed the culture necessary, right? So, and for us, building trust, it was a strategic imperative. We had to have it, right? So we recruited for trustworthiness. We trained to build it every day. If you had it, you were rewarded and promoted. And if you lost it or compromised on it, you were either sidelined or you were gone, because we just could not have somebody on our team in that extreme environment who we didn't have a high level of trust
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny you mention the example of sports. Quite often we see that when trust or lack of it make or break a team. It's obvious.
Yeah. Well, my thought to tag on to what you said was, when you hear post championship interviews, right? When they talk after they win, the World Cup or the Super Bowl or whatever it might be, when you have a championship team and then they interview the members of the team, they don't always say the word trust, but the way they describe the feeling and what it meant to their success, it's all there, right? Whether they say the word or not,
Yeah.
that they could count on their teammates. They were there were some portions in the game where things were sort of dicey, but they knew that their teammates were going to come through. It all speaks to having this culture of really high trust.
Yeah. There is this movie, not sure if you've seen it, George, Any Given Sunday, where Al Pacino played Miami Sharks coach. And there was this scene, the movie was in the late 90s, I think. Yeah, it was in late 90s. And there was this scene in the locker room where he's, let's say, raising his voice, shouting at the team, this motivational speech in which he's telling everyone, you have to look at your teammate in the eyes and you need to agree together and fight for every single inch as a team, not as an individuals, So,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's, yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And in fact, when I talk to leaders, CEOs, presidents of companies and organizations, right, and they lament that they're just not happy with their people aren't working as a team, right, and they want, how do I get more teamwork? And when you look at the organization, you realize that they're really not a team. They're a group of people who happen to come to work in the same building, but if you wanted to call them a team, they would be a bowling team, because everybody just plays in their lane and they are compensated based on their individual behavior, and there's no motivation for them to sacrifice for others. And teamwork is all based on shared sacrifice. And so, I think business leaders, if they want more teamwork, they have to look at how do you incentivize your people? What's their goal? What are they trying to achieve? What matters most to them? And when the organization's success is what matters most to them, that's when you get teamwork, because then people are willing to sacrifice and devote their discretionary time to helping others.
Yeah. Leadership gives us the opportunity or responsibility. However, we see it to impact far beyond what we imagine. How do you view the ripple effect of leadership, George?
Well, it's remarkable, because as a leader, you have the opportunity to affect so many people, not just directly but indirectly.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's no doubt that it ripples out throughout the organization and then throughout the networks of the people who are part of the organization. Sure.
And do you think about the long-term impact of your work or no?
Well, you like to think that you have, in fact, I am now talking to organizations and so forth about what I call the unforgettable leader. I mean, we all have people, every successful person has at least one person in their life who they carry around with them day after day. Somebody that was a leader in their life who they touched them so deeply that they now, whenever they face questions or concerns or have to make a decision or whatever, they think about how would this person have done it? What would they have said to me, right? And I think the goal is to become that kind of person, right? Somebody who has the vision for, not only where they want to go, what they want to accomplish. They have a reputation of being a really high trust person, very, very trustworthy. And they have the ability, they bring such a positive level of energy to the relationship that together they just become somebody who impacts people wherever they go. And I think we should all strive to be unforgettable in that regard.
Let's go back and talk about your time at Top Gun and Blue Angels. What sets apart the leadership training at Top Gun?
Well, we realized when the first movie came out that it wasn't going to be a documentary. But the experience at the school, I think the big difference, there were some portions of the movie that I thought were very realistic. The flying scenes I thought were very well done, and the scenes on the aircraft carrier I thought were very well done on the flight deck. But
and on that, George, sorry to cut you, does it really accurately reflect the nature of fighter pilot's life, commitment and discipline?
Well, certainly, the broad strokes, the commitment, the intensity, I thought it showed very well the students, how badly they wanted to defeat the instructors in the training scenarios, right? Because the process is you start out with a very basic scenario, 1 versus 1, and then 2 versus 2, and then the scenarios gradually become more complex and more challenging. And if the students have a very good plan, it doesn't have to be a great plan, but it has to be a good plan, a solid plan, and then they execute it with discipline, then they're at least going to survive. And if they may very well win, and which is great, right? That's the goal. You want to have the students leave there with great confidence in their abilities. But there's no individual trophy for a Top Gun graduate because the emphasis is all teamwork. You want the students working together, becoming a cohesive team, and the instructors just keep challenging them every day to get better and better and better.
And as a leader, how do you deal with egos? And yes, it's a teamwork, but then they want more. They want to impress you. They want to excel. They want to perform at their best. and most of the time the ego play a vital role. How do you manage all this chaos? But yeah, you know what I mean?
Sure. I think it goes back to what I said earlier about you need to structure the culture has to be around the team success, right? And you want friendly competition within that structure. You want people striving to be really good to measure up to the standards that everybody else has on the team. But at the end of the day, it's got to be about us. And and they have to understand that by contributing to the team success, it also contributes to their own individual reputation, their own individual success in whatever way. And when you can get them to, and you, it doesn't happen by itself. I mean, you have to recruit for it. And that's what with the Blue Angels and the Topgun, that's what they're looking for, right? I mean, they're trying to decide as they select the new members of the school or the new members of the Blue Angel Squadron. They're looking for that temperament, right? That person who is wildly committed to excellence, but at the same time is a team player, is somebody who supports the other members of the team in order to achieve a collective goal. And interestingly enough, one of the key questions as you get down to the crunch where you're trying to make a decision between which person here do we hire, they both have to absolutely be good, very, very good at whatever their role is going to be, as a pilot or whatever. But the question always is that which one of these two is going to come in here every day and accept constructive feedback every day and not get defensive or discouraged or dejected or whatever, that they're just going to keep coming back, trying to get better every day. And we would trade off, a little bit of skill if this person over here was more willing, because if they keep coming every day and they just keep wanting to learn and get better, you can get them. As long as they have a reasonable amount of talent, you can get them where you need them to be.
Back in the days when I was hosting major events, like power boating, for example, we use side events and some public activation activities. And one of it was to bring, for example, the Red Arrows, or when I was in the UAE in Dubai, we brought what was it called? A Fursan. Yes, it was a Fursan. And the impact is always wow, and they do a couple of flyovers at a low, sometimes it's a bit crazy. I don't know, you guys, the Blue Angels, how close you are from the action. But what mesmerizes me all the time, and I guess even your time with the Blue Angels, where you guys operate with extreme precision. George, what's the secret of the team cohesion?
Well, no surprise, the cohesion comes from this level of trust that we build, and it happens, day after day after day. The cohesion comes from people living up to some shared values, standards, and an unbelievable level of candor, which is beyond honesty. I mean, Sid, you're an honest person. I ask you a question and you give me the truth as you understand it. But for us, we needed more than that. We needed candor. We needed people to speak the truth when we all needed to hear it, right? Because when you're moving as fast as we were, 300, 400, 500 miles an hour, if I as the leader had to get the truth, I had to ask for it, it was going to be too late. Yeah. So, we would have very candid debriefs after the flight, even during the mission or in the briefings. I mean, if somebody had something to say that we needed to hear in order to raise our game or to stay on track, it was your duty to speak up. It wasn't just, oh yeah, we welcome what you have to say. No, it's your duty. If we found out afterwards that we could have performed better, or avoided a mistake, and you had the information and you didn't share it. But the challenge though is that you authorize somebody to bring you the truth. You're going to get it once, and then depending upon how you react to the truth, you may never see it again. And so we as leaders have to be wise enough, mature enough, in order to sift out the truth, however it shows up. And sometimes it shows up as a whimper, as a whisper. And other times it shows up like a thunderclap. And, I say to people, who is, other than your spouse and your children, as a leader, do you know who the best person is to bring you the truth? Somebody who doesn't like you very much, because they don't care how you feel about it, right? And they're going to take this truth and they're going to wrap it up with a lot of drama and stuff and their emotion, and they're going to stick it in your face. And we have to be smart enough to unpack it and say, okay, where in here is there something that I can take action on in order to raise my game, right? So
we spoke earlier about the Top Gun movie, and especially after the second one, Maverick. What impact had it had or still have on the aviation industry and recruitment?
Oh, it's incredible impact. So many folks have I met over the years that were inspired to sign up and serve because of the movies. So, it's a big deal, really. And they're working on a third Top Gun movie now.
Indeed. Which is fantastic. We need more of this kind of movies, that motivates, that inspires, that we need more of the stuff.
Yeah, I agree. When I grew up, we were going to the moon, and it was just so inspiring. That whole NASA, Apollo, Mercury, Gemini, and then the Apollo missions to go to the moon. And yeah, you're right. We need that. Bring us together.
Let's shift gear and talk about your book, which is right here. Here we go. We're going to talk about it.
Thank you.
So your book outlines 5 pillars of trust: character, commitment, competence, connection, and communication. Which do leaders struggle with the most?
Well, that's a hard one because I see shortcomings in all 5. But the leader who doesn't walk his talk, right? The character piece, right? That they want everybody to behave a certain way, but they don't behave a certain way. The hypocrisy is a real problem. Or, the commitment piece is, they want everybody to give 100%, but the leader doesn't give 100%. Or the competence piece, right? Where the leader's really good, but he's doing his last job because that's what got him promoted, right? So he's so comfortable doing his last job that he keeps doing rather than continuing to grow and become really good at this job that he's been given, right? And then connection is, I often say though, is one that's really missing in this high-speed world that we live in these days. Everybody's trying to be so efficient, right? We all have to-do lists a mile long. We're just trying to pedal as fast as we can. And the question I had to ask myself every day about the connection was, do they believe I understand them? Do they believe that I get them, that I understand their hopes and their concerns and their challenges and what they're facing in every day, what I'm asking them to do? And if they believe that I understand them and that I'm taking them into account when I'm making decisions, then they're going to follow along. But if they don't really believe I get them, then there's always hesitancy and so forth. And to build connection with somebody, Stephen Covey in his famous book, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he makes a wonderful statement in there. He says, you can be efficient with things, but you can't be efficient with people. So to build the connection, you have to slow down and you have to take time to relate to people in order to have them feel like you understand them, right? And too often leaders, you know, they're just trying to be too efficient, right? And then finally, communication, you know, is that can always be a problem when leaders don't communicate clearly. In fact, the biggest issue for leaders with communication is the assumption that it's occurred, right? I sent the email, they get it, or I had the talk, she gets it, or you know, whatever. They don't get it, at least not right away. You have to keep transmitting your message over and over in a very consistent way until they finally receive the message, right? And too often we assume that they get it when they really don't.
Can you share a story or two of how these 5 principles played out in your career?
Oh my. Well, I would say, you know, okay, let's take them one at a time very quickly. Character, right? You're always, when you're faced with these moments of truth, these moments of decision, you have to make a choice. Am I gonna compromise my values, or am I gonna do the hard thing here and stick true to them? And I could give you a million times where sometimes I made good choices and sometimes I didn't, but I always tried to. And you know, and the company that I work with now, ACI Jet, I mean, we went through COVID. It was amazing to watch as we tried to, as an organization, we tried to stick to one of our core values of integrity. And we always, as we made decisions, really tough decisions about layoffs and so forth, in order for the company to survive, you know, we had to walk our talk. And that was, I think, a key part of why the company is very successful. Commitment. Yeah. I mean, life gets tough, and sometimes, you know, your commitment, but I talk about, you know, where does commitment come from? It comes from a very deep, intense, and a very clear sense of purpose. When you know why you're doing what you're doing, and in the military, we call it mission. When you know what mission you're on and why it's so important, that's what helps you get up off the deck whenever you've been knocked down, and get back in the game and deal with adversity and resilience and so forth. And then competence, you got to have the growth mindset and just keep, you know, I tried to just always keep getting better and better and better. And what was easiest for me was if there was a performance gap I had, I would try to learn how to teach that aspect of whatever it might be. You know, I became early in my career, I taught carrier landings because I didn't feel like I was as good a lander. And we have a competition all the time in order to drive excellence. And I wanted to get better at it. So I put myself in a position where I had to teach it. And that seemed to help me. And then connection is always one that, you know, I'm the father of 2 daughters, and I'm having to learn every day about how to help them feel like I understand them, which of course the common refrain is, Dad, you don't understand.
Tell me about it.
Help me.
I'm used to it.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, communication. We always are. How do you communicate better every day, whether it's in writing or orally or, you know, however? How do you remain clear, concise, and direct in your communications? Because everybody's getting bombarded by all this stuff coming in now from every direction, and in order to cut through the noise, you have to be very effective and in your messaging and consistent over a period of time until they finally get the message.
Yeah. Thanks for that. If someone wanted to build trust today, and we know there is no silver bullet, what's the first step, George?
Well, I'll plug my book. In my book, I include a what I call a personal action plan, and what it's very simple, but you just look at each of these 5 C's, if you will, and you evaluate, what is one little thing that I can do to build my character today, or to, deepen my commitment, or raise my level of competence. One little thing, and then do it, and so forth. And then also, I ask people to take a look at one important professional relationship that they would like to improve, and one personal relationship, and what can they do to deepen that relationship by demonstrating trustworthiness in each of those 5. And I'm sorry, there's a guy outside leaf blower. Can you hear that? Oh,
It's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I would tell people just to, pick one thing, that ask themselves, what can I do to help this person feel that I understand them and that I'm more trustworthy, and then take it step by step by step. But first you got to work on yourself,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
work on.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So let's talk about the process of writing this book. High trust leadership, building high performance teams. George, what was the hardest part? Was it organizing the ideas, doing the research, finding the time to write, setting up the right environment?
well, my story is that when I left active duty, and I would meet people and they would find out a little bit about my background, people were very curious about how did we in naval aviation, how did we train, how did we lead, and so forth. And so I would get invited to come and speak to various groups. And over time, I developed, so the book is essentially a compilation of the various presentations that I've given over the years. And so the content was already there, which was nice. I didn't have to really go out from a blank sheet of paper and have to research it. But I did have to organize it, and I did have to think about, I tried to keep the book, as you'll see, it's pretty short. It's
It
190
is.
pages or something, because I hope that people will actually read it. So whittling it down to the essence was probably my biggest challenge, and then just dedicating the time to doing it, because it always takes longer than you ever think, once you get into it. So that was probably my
Yeah.
biggest
And
challenge.
the editing process, was it easy?
It was actually pretty enjoyable, when I actually dedicated the time and sat down and so forth. And oh boy, it's getting
Let's.
louder. Sorry.
No, it passed.
It was very interesting. I had some very good, got some very good feedback from people along the way. And when you have the mindset that, um, they're there to help it get better, and you don't get defensive about it, it was very good. I learned a lot in the
Yeah,
process.
yeah. Let's shift gear and talk about mental resilience and handling pressure. How did you personally develop mental resilience during high stakes missions?
Yeah. Well, we had a saying in naval aviation that you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your training. And so we tried to train as realistically as we possibly could, so that when we had to go out, whether it was in combat or whether it was flying a Blue Angel air show, we had rehearsed it and practiced it and thought about it so much. Our motto was, we're going to practice till we get it right, and then keep practicing till we can't get it wrong. And it's all about training realistically, about training. I flew 25 missions or so in Desert Storm, and
Wow.
when I got back, there were my friends who didn't get a chance to participate. We would talk about it. They would ask me questions about what it was like and so forth. And I was pleased to tell them that, other than actually being shot at, our training was much harder than the actual combat was, other than, when you're in the, but, and that's exactly what you want. You want to be, train harder than you actually have to
Yeah.
compete, right? And then you have
Yeah.
resilience, you have the ability to handle the moment, right? And
How do fighter pilots train for G forces? What kind of impact does it have on the body? And how do you ensure pilots can endure those extreme conditions?
yeah, so we use a centrifuge to, if anybody has seen the recent Blue Angels documentary that came out almost about a little under a year ago, and I think if anybody streams on Amazon, they can see it. But in that documentary, they show the pilots going through the centrifuge, and all fighter pilots who are going to have to withstand G forces. That's a key component of the training, is you get a chance to understand at high G what you have to do. I mean, literally, you have to strain every major muscle group in your body in order to keep the blood up in your head, because your heart's not strong enough at 6-7 G's to keep you conscious, right? So this straining maneuver that you have to do, you have to learn how to do it, and then, typically folks exercise really, every day or every other day or whatever in order to stay fit and so forth, and then the training is what allows you to. And then we wear in the fleet, we wear G suits, and that's helpful to some degree. I mean, it's not a panacea, but the challenge with handling G forces is the onset rate. If you get surprised and you reef back on the stick and you suddenly go from 1 G to 6-7 Gs, that's where you have problems with people passing out. And the G suit that you wear around your legs and so forth and your stomach helps constrict to give you a chance to catch up, if you will, so that you can then do the muscle contractions in order to stay awake.
Yeah.
So,
And George, can you enlighten our listeners when talking about visualization? During your time or now, those pilots, when executing a sequence or performance, do they visualize prior all the movements? How does it work? Why I'm asking this, because a long time ago when we had this Forsan or the Red Arrows, I remember someone told me, but they might have some kind of sensors or some kind of alarms if they are too close. And I said, come on, no way, no way. At that speed, what kind of sensors that, or someone maybe was joking, telling me, no, they are on autopilots and stuff like that. Oh, anyway, nonsense, But I imagine to be so sharp mentally, and you need to have the physical capabilities and working as one, as a team, because at the end of the day, from the outside, when you see the performance, it's like this a huge bird, composed on 6, 7, 8. I believe. What's the minimum? Sorry.
Yeah, the Blue Angels are 6 jets, but the Red Arrows are 9.
Yeah. How does it work with the fighter jet pilots or Blue Angels?
Right. Well, with the Blue Angels, before every flight, we would have a very detailed briefing, and then we would do what we call chair flying, where I as the leader I would recite all the various transmissions that I was going to make during the demonstration, and then we would each be flying our position, sitting at the conference table before we went out and flew for real. And when I joined the Blue Angels, I had never done it to that level of detail before, and so I just, okay, here's how we do things here. And I really found that it significantly improved my performance when I'd flown twice, right? First time at the conference table, and your mind doesn't really know the difference. And it gives you the opportunity to just remind yourself and think about all the different things that you need to be doing, power settings, G, profile, placement, what am I, because I'm navigating based on visual reference to the ground. what are my checkpoints and all of that. And it really helps get you prepared so that when you go out and climb in the jet and the canopies come down, you are fully in the moment, ready to go out and perform at your very best. Yeah, I thought it was terrific. Something I really hadn't been. I mean, I had, in the fleet we brief and we talk about and we speak in detail about what we're about to do in order to be ready to go, but we don't get quite to the level that the Blue Angels do. Just so it was cool.
Fantastic.
It works.
Yeah. Many leaders struggle with balancing trust and accountability. What's the right approach?
I don't really see that one feeds the other, I think. I mean, in order to have trust in somebody, they have to be willing to be accountable for their performance, right? So transparency and accountability are very much a part of developing your trustworthiness, I think. And I think the really good people really want to be held accountable. They want to keep score. They want to know, but it's a mindset difference, right? Sometimes people don't like, they resist accountability because it's a judging mindset. It's a negative thing, right? But if you have a growth mindset, a learner's mindset, accountability is helping you figure out, where am I and where's the gap that I need to continue to work on to keep getting better. So they welcome the accountability and the feedback, and that's a critical. If you as a leader are trying to develop a culture of high performance, you have to instill that intention, that attitude among your people that, hey, we embrace the truth. We want to know the truth because that's the only way that we can figure out how we're going to get to the next step.
And as a leader, George, where do you fit empathy?
I laugh, but I talked earlier about connection, right? The question I had to ask myself was, do my teammates, do they believe I understand them? Which is a different question than, do I believe I understand them? Because what I believe is interesting, but not sufficient. What matters is, what do they believe, right? And for them to believe that I understand them, I have to occasionally, look through the world, try to look through the world through their window, because we all come at it with different life experiences, different backgrounds, different preferences, all of that. And so empathy is really key in helping your teammates believe that you understand them and that you're taking them into account whenever you're making decisions and so forth.
What daily habits or mindset shifts can help someone level up their leadership?
Well, I just, mentioned about the mindset about, continuous improvement, right? Having and there's a wonderful book out there I think it's called Mindset, by a woman who's a professor at Stanford University, talking about, having that growth mindset is really key. Another one is sort of understanding. I'll tell you a quick story, and it's in the book, but I'll tell you a quick story that really was a big shift for me. See, with the Blue Angels, you don't come in as the wingman and then come up to be the leader. You come in as the leader. And I had commanded an F-18 squadron in the fleet to be eligible to be the leader of the Blues. So I come to the Blues with much more flight experience than my wingman, but I don't have any Blue Angel experience. And so I'm having to learn from the other members. And the other piece that your listeners need to know is that every year we have 50% turnover in the formation. So when you see them fly, 3 of the pilots are in their first year and 3 of the pilots are in their second year. So it's a 2-year assignment. And so when I showed up, there were 3 of the pilots had flown the year before, and 3 of us were new, right? And so, and I'm the leader, right? So the attention is all on me because by definition, we're never going to get any better than what I lead them in out there in the formation. So it's the first week of winter training, and I'm flying 2 and 3 times a day, and I'm trying to learn this, and I'm trying to fly to a level of precision that I hadn't had to for, when you're landing aboard the carrier, you got to be very precise, but that only lasts, a couple minutes, but now I got to do it for 40 minutes, right? Anyway, make a long story just a little longer. I'm sitting in the debrief at the end of my first week, and I'm trying as hard as I can, and I'm tired and worn out and so forth. And we're in the debrief, and I'm expected to here are the mistakes that I'm aware of that I made because, they need to get a read on to what degree am I aware of my performance, right? Well, shoot. After about the first 3 or 4 maneuvers, my bucket is full. I can't remember anything else that we did. And so in the debrief, as we're going through all the maneuvers, they keep chipping in at me. Oh yeah, well, boss, you did this, and then boss, yeah, then you did this, and finally, in sort of exasperation, I finally said to him, "Look, can't you guys see? I'm trying as hard as I can here, right? And God bless them, these guys were the best, but they said, Roger that, boss. We know you're trying as hard as you can, but we don't judge on effort. We judge on performance. And in these 5 maneuvers, you suck. You have to get better. You're waggling your wings too much or whatever it was, right? And in that moment, I realized that they weren't bringing me all this criticism because they were trying to score points or make me feel bad or them look good or whatever. They were bringing this to me because they so badly wanted us to be the very best team we could be. And we weren't going to get there if I didn't get there. And so when I made that mental shift about their intention, then that changed, everything for me. And now, okay, bring it. I want everything. I want to get better.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
anyway.
it's fantastic, and thanks for sharing that. It's one of the best example where you create a culture where feedback is welcomed all the time. Yeah. Do you see similarities in elite sports comparing to leadership style in the military?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there are so many comparisons and so forth. And going back to, my story, the leader is responsible for the culture. And the leader needs to make sure that the culture is such that candid feedback is welcome. And when I talk to organizations and so forth, I really see this is something that's missing in the corporate world. They rarely debrief their performance, because, well, we all have excuses, right? And they're all so busy. And some of that's a story they tell themselves, and they go from meeting to meeting to meeting or event to event to event. And they don't take time to really talk about, what is our performance? So I spend a fair amount of time helping people try to develop that as part of their organizational culture. And it takes time. Naval aviation wasn't really good at this right away. I mean, it took a long time, but the key was we had to make it a priority. Yeah. We had to say, look, we're going to do this after every flight. And it can't be an afterthought. It has to be part of, as you're scheduling whatever event or project or whatever you're doing, part of that scheduling needs to be, okay, a day after or whenever, we're going to have a debrief. Yeah. And here's what I want people to bring to the debrief so that we can have a productive discussion about what happened. Because no individual knows everything that happened, right? So each person has to bring their piece of it, and then you figure out collectively, okay, here's what happened. We all got on the table. Now, why did it happen? Both the good and the bad. You want to reinforce the good and then you want to correct and improve on any of the mistakes or shortcomings that you had. And then what are we going to do tomorrow differently based on this experience? And then how do we share this lessons with others so that they can benefit from our experience? And it takes time and it takes practice, but the bottom line is you just got to do it, and you'll get better at it as you go. If you keep the intention of being, hey, we're doing this so that we all get better. And when people get defensive or whatever, you have to talk about it. You have to
What? One thing I need to flag, looking back to when I was a coach, one thing that I loved is the debriefing. I love those sections. And one thing I learned is the minute you enter the room, either during the briefing or debriefing, you need to shift slightly your mindset that you take your hat that you are the coach, because you're there to get as much feedback as possible, as much input as possible based on the performance, based on whether it's a training, whether it was a game, we lost or we won, and try to create this culture where feedback is welcomed. And forget about the hierarchy, forget about I'm the coach, I'm the leader, it's my way or the highway. And I think most leaders, they fail on that, because welcoming feedback, listening, analyzing, digesting whatever you are receiving, plus all the resources we have, video analysis or whatever we have, just to make sure that we get out with the common, let's say, plan in terms of, okay, we know what we did, we know where we need to improve. It's like having a key to that door, to that lock, and and then we move on. And I fully agree with you about making sure to create a culture where feedback is welcome.
Right. And the way we do it at the Blue Angels is I, as the leader, start the debrief. And I make a few general comments about how the air show went and something, but then I confess, if you will, any significant mistake that I'm aware of that affected the performance of the team, anything significant. And what that does for us is a couple things. Number one is, if I'm making a mistake, if I made a significant mistake and I'm not aware of it, we got an issue to talk about. If I made a significant mistake and I'm not willing to admit it, we got another thing to talk about, right? And what that does is it sets the example for the rest of the team that mistakes are going to get made. We're human beings. As long as it's not negligent or whatever, then mistakes are acceptable as long as you own them and you're dedicated to remedying that so that you hopefully don't make the same mistake again, right? Now we go around the room and everybody on the team does the very same thing. And now you, as the leader, you have the moral authority, whatever you want to call it. You've set the example that now you can expect everybody else to have the same level of candor because you have demonstrated it as an example, right? And it's really very cool. And again, everybody has to be reminded of the intention of the debrief, and if somebody starts to get, sometimes the debriefs get pretty loud, but they're never personal, right? And when you as a leader see them starting to get personal, then you have to police it and you have to call somebody out on it if they're letting it become personal.
Looking ahead, George, what leadership trends do you see emerging in the next decade or two?
Well, one of the things that I'm talking to organizations about now is the importance of developing leaders at every level. The world is changing so fast, and organizations have to adapt so quickly that we can no longer have this, traditional leader follower kind of construct. everybody, whatever their role is in the organization, needs to think of themselves as a leader, right? As first of all, leading yourself. What do I have to do in order to live up to my responsibilities and continue to improve whatever area of responsibility I have, to continue to make changes to make it better and better? And then, if I've been entrusted with the care of other people as a supervisor or manager or whatever level you are in the organization, how am I doing leading them? I have to keep getting better as a leader of them, right? And I think that's really inherent in if we're going to continue to be successful, because wow, the world just keeps changing faster and faster.
Yeah.
So if you want to be adaptive, if you want to have resilience, you got to develop leaders everywhere. And, in the military, we were in some ways fortunate in that you couldn't have lateral entry. We couldn't hire somebody to come in at a mid-level or a senior level. So we had to grow our own leaders. So throughout my career, I am training either my literal relief or figuratively, the young folks that are going to follow me years later. So always trying to develop leadership.
And to close the segment prior to the lightning round, if you could give one piece of leadership advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. There's so many things I'd like to tell my younger self. I think it's you got to think about it all as a journey, right? And just try to get a little better every day and be patient with yourself, right? Too many of us carry around this voice in our head that is this huge critic that is just, chipping at us all the time. And you just need to be forgiving of yourself and, do your best and just keep trying to get a little better every day, right? And don't be quite so impatient.
Fantastic. Now it's time for our lightning round. George, ready for speedy Q&A?
Let's go.
If you could have a dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Abraham Lincoln. And I would love to, he faced the most polarized situation you could imagine, where we fought a civil war. And wow, we're not there yet in America, but we are really polarized. And I would love to talk to him about how he thought about it and how he helped overcome that incredible polarization back in the 1860s.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Not sure if you read this book, Team of Rivals.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book.
It is. Yeah. What's the best book on leadership you've ever read?
Well, I think for, interpersonal stuff, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think is a must read for somebody to be an effective leader. And a book I took a lot of inspiration from was Admiral Stockdale's book, In Love and War. And it's written by he and his wife about the time when he was the senior POW during the Vietnam War. And just an amazing book about how he persevered through that and ultimately won the Medal of Honor for his leadership during those difficult times and years in solitary confinement, being tortured and so forth, but yet led his comrades to return with honor.
Great. What habit or ritual keeps you performing at a high level?
Well, we talk about having individual personal energy in 4 dimensions, right? Physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual purpose. And I try to have habits in all 4 of them. But because the physical dimension really affects the other 3 significantly, I'd just say the answer to your question is exercise, nutrition, and trying to get enough sleep every night to play at my best.
The last one is hard.
Can be, yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite failure that ended up being a great lesson?
Oh, my goodness. Well, going back to being the father of 2 girls, I fail every day, and I'm trying to get better every day. And they keep telling me, I get a lot of help. So I'm getting better.
Great. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Something that stuck with me, and I'm going to tell you what the little saying is. I had went to an admiral who spoke to the air wing when we were getting ready to go on deployment and so forth, and he made a comment that somehow stuck with me that really helped me in my leadership journey. And he said, "Never let a significant event go unnoticed. Never let a significant event go unnoticed." Either positive or negative. When something occurs that's really positive, then make sure it gets noticed and celebrated and recognized and reinforced. Likewise, if you get a whiff of something that doesn't seem quite right, don't let it go unnoticed. You have to address it. And there are too many leaders that sort of look away whenever they have a sense that there's something not going well and hope that it'll just get better. But as we all say, bad news never gets better with
Yeah,
age.
yeah. What's one misconception about leadership that bothers you?
I've actually had people say to me, how difficult could it be to be a leader in the military? You give orders and people do what you tell them, right?
Follow orders.
And that's right. And while that's technically true, if I had to order somebody to do something, then there was a failure somewhere. Either this person shouldn't have been hired, or I didn't invest in the person or the company or the organization such that I would have to order somebody to do something, right? So I think that's, because if you really want the very best of people, and you need the very best of everybody whenever the stakes are high, when you're in combat, right? So you got to lead. It can't be this, do what I tell you and order people. So that frustrates me that people think that we in the military are very unthinking, that we just bark out orders and people do what you
Yeah,
tell them. No,
yeah,
not at
yeah.
all.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee.
However, I have started drinking a little tea now. I've told myself, I need to learn how to have a little less coffee and try to learn tea. So I've lately started becoming a tea drinker, but we'll see.
And George, if you could relive one flight from your career, which one would it be?
Wow. I was so lucky to fly, so amazing experiences. But since you make me pick one, um, I would love to have another clear, beautiful, blue sky, warm, sunny day over San Francisco to do another air show. We just had the 2 years that I flew with the Blues. We had beautiful weather, and it was magical in that landscape to fly an air show.
And how do you unwind after a high pressure day or, let's say, a tough week?
Well, I try to relax as best I can, right? I live in a beautiful area here in California, and so I just love to go out and just get away, go for a hike, get out in nature, and just not think about anything, just enjoy the joy of the day. I may call a friend or call my wife or visit, whatever is a release, right? That you can take the pack off.
Excellent. And finally, if you could give our listeners a piece of advice or wisdom on any topic.
Wow. Well, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I believe that the key to success as a leader, to become the unforgettable leader, is to proactively build trust, both at work, at home, it works in the community, but invest in the relationships you have so that people feel that you're trustworthy, and then everything else comes from that, in whatever aspect, because trust is the water that all relationships swim in. And whenever the water is clean and clear, the relationships are strong, you can move quickly, you can be adaptive. It's just a lot of fun. But whenever the trust is low and the water's dark, everything slows down. It becomes really challenging and painful and so forth. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that right now. I mean, I've never seen such low levels of trust across all dimensions of life globally. I mean, everybody's going through this right now, and we got to figure out how to turn this all around. And if people do that, if your organization is viewed as a high trust organization, you're going to break out and dominate, because people aren't thinking about this in a proactive way. We're just reacting to now that it's broken in many places, right? And trying to get it back. And it's hard.
Wow, fantastic. George Dom, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation.
My pleasure, Sid. Thanks for the invitation. It's been great.
And before we wrap up, can you tell our listeners where they can contact you, learn more about your work, or just connect with you online?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. Also, my website is georgedom.com, and you can catch up with me there. And I'd love to hear from anybody that's listened to this interview, what they think.
And to our listeners, check out the book, High Trust Leadership, Building High Performance Teams, available on Amazon. It's packed with actionable insights that any leader can apply. And before we go, I leave you with a quote. Trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It's the fundamental principle that holds all relationships. That's from Stephen Covey. And I think it perfectly sums up today's conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who would benefit from these insights. You can now watch the entire episode on our YouTube and Spotify channels. While you are here, please do us a favor, hit follow and tap the bell so you never miss an episode. We do our best to bring you stories that inspire, challenge, and motivate. We appreciate your support. Thanks for listening and watching. Until next time, stay curious, inspired, and make a difference. See you soon. Take care.